Good evening. Welcome. I have no idea how to get this started because we've never done it before. So, hi. I'm glad you guys are here. I have no idea what we're in store for tonight. So, I was kind of talking just, I'm a pattern person, and so I know really well, like when I'm preparing for a Sunday morning, like how many pages of notes I need, how many slides it's going to be, and I can usually guess based on how long the sermon's going to be. So normally, I'll have a couple pages of notes, and I'll have between 10 and 15 slides, and that means it's going to be about half an hour. So I've got about 45 slides for tonight. So by my calculations, that means we're here for an hour and a half, but I don't think it's going to be that long, but we're going to just kind of have to wait and see. So welcome, glad you're here. Just so you guys know, if you want to download these slides, I've got a PDF for you, and you can just either go to the website, bit.ly.com, or not bit.ly, just bit.ly Deep Dive Men, or you can use the QR code. That will take you right to a PDF, and you can download that PDF. It'll be up here the whole time as well if you want to grab it there. If you have questions, you can text questions to this number. I've got my phone here, but at some point it will probably shut off and I won't see the questions anymore. But if like you text during and I see a question up there, I may try to get to it. Otherwise, we'll get to them at the end, and that's just what we'll plan to do. All right. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and open with prayer. Father, we thank you so much for your word and for the way that you graciously revealed yourself to us in it. And tonight, as we take some time to dig into what you have to say about this important topic of being a man, pray that you will just give us wisdom and that you will help me to speak your words, and that as I speak them, your Spirit will change them to be what each of us needs to hear. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for providing all that we need. In your name, amen. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about what does the Bible say it means to be a man. And I know that not everybody here is a man, and that's okay, because this is going to be for you also, all right? Next week, we'll talk about what does the Bible say it means to be a woman, and that will also be for everybody. So I was kind of thinking through, what are the different categories that we sort ourselves into regarding gender, relationship, that kind of thing. So if you are a man and you are married, then there's going to be a lot of good stuff for you tonight, obviously. And hopefully maybe the question that you're asking is, what do I need to do with this? It's a really simple, basic question. If you're a man and you're a father, same kind of question. What do I need to do with this? If you're a man and you're not a father and you're not married, one of the questions is, what do I need to do with this? But there's another question, how do I prepare myself for some of this? Because we will talk a little bit about what it means to be a husband and what it means to be a father. If you are not a man, so if you are a woman and you are not married, maybe tonight one of the questions you're asking is, how do I find a man like this? All right, and that's okay. Another question is, how do I encourage the men in my life to be like this? If you are a woman and you are married, one of the questions you might be tempted to ask is, why isn't my husband like this? Don't ask that question, all right? Another question you might be tempted to ask is, how can I make my husband be like this? Don't ask that question either, because your turn is coming next week, right? And you don't want him to turn that back around. So the question for you is, how do I encourage my husband in these ways, right? Because the reality is, none of us hit the standard, right? We all fall short in some ways, and so that's going to be true. And so the question is not, where is he falling short, but how can I encourage the good things that he's doing? And so maybe that's the question for you. Wherever you're at in life, hopefully some of this will be good for you, because we do believe that the Bible is good for all of us, right? All of the Bible is good for all of us, and that's why we're here tonight. So just really quick, there are lots of different ways that people teach the Bible, and these are the way some people talk about preaching. And I'm just showing this to you because I want you to understand what we're going to try to accomplish tonight. So really quick, expository teaching or preaching is when you just try to expose the meaning of the verse, right? And so I'm not necessarily going to the verse trying to find something to prove my point, but I'm just saying, what does this verse mean? And then I want to realistically, this is me most of the time, right? Most of the time, one of my goals when I'm preaching to you is I want to expose the meaning of the verse to you. Now, one of the close cousins of expository teaching is what we call exegetical teaching. This also wants to kind of get to the meaning of the passage. The big difference is the exegetical teaching goes a little bit deeper into the verse. Like, it may go more into the languages and into the structure. It's the kind of stuff you do a lot of in seminary, and some of you really love exegetical studies and exegetical teaching, and that's great. But some of it gets a little too deep, and people are like, oh, that just went a little too far for me. But it's much better to do exegetical than eisegetical, which is when I take what I want the Bible to say and try to make it happen. So we're going to try to avoid doing that tonight. Sequential is just really simply, you're just going through something verse by verse, right? So if we said we're going to do a deep dive on Genesis, that would be more sequential. We'd start at Genesis 1 and work our way through the whole book of Genesis. That would be sequential. Narrative, we won't do much of that at all tonight, but we will do some of it next week. Narrative is when we're kind of looking at the stories in the Bible and unpacking the stories and letting them kind of speak for themselves. Thematic is, we do a lot of this here as well. Our last series was kind of a thematic series where you take something and you say, what does the whole Bible say about this? And let's look at the whole Bible, but usually you drill down on one passage, and the final is topical. This is when you say, I want to know everything the Bible says about a given topic. And it would be awesome if we could do that tonight, right? That would be great if we said, let's see everything the Bible has to say about being a man. Here's the problem. Everything the Bible says about being a man. So I went to Bible Gateway. So this is just really quick, BibleGateway.com, BibleStudyTools.com. These are two websites you can go to do like a word search. Like, how many times does the Bible talk about this topic? And if you guys notice, right here, you guys see that? 2,683 times the Bible says the word man. Now, if we change it to men, it's almost another 2,000, so you're actually over 4,000 references to man and men. That's why we're not going to look at everything the Bible has to say about being a man, right? We don't have time to look at 2,000 up to 4,000 verses, so we're not going to do that. But this is a great tool to use sometimes when you want to do a study on a topic. Say, I want to know more about what the Bible says about rainbows or unicorns, right? So you type in unicorn, you're not going to get any results. But there are some things in there about rainbows or butterflies, right? So you can type your topic in, it will tell you where all the verses are. BibleGateway.com is my favorite. That's what this one is right here. All right, but what we are going to talk about tonight, we're going to look at these main passages, all right? And we'll walk through what all of these passages have to say, not necessarily in this order. I think I tried to put them in order that they appear in the Bible. But we're going to look at all of these passages. They're going to drive what we talk about for the most part tonight. So what you can see there is it's kind of a good cross-section of the Bible. We've got some of the early stuff in Genesis. We've got some historical books in Joshua and 1 Kings, some of the wisdom literature from Proverbs. We've got some of the epistles from Ephesians, as well as down into Titus and 1 Peter. The only thing we're missing is the Gospels. We did a lot of the Gospels in the series, and I don't know, we'll probably reference some of the passages in the Gospel tonight as we go. Let me give you one disclaimer, all right? One disclaimer here, and the disclaimer is that's going to happen sometimes, that the screen goes black, and we don't know why. It just has to do with software. But my disclaimer is this. I'm going to use generalizations, both tonight and next week. And a generalization is a statement that seems to be true in most situations or for most people, but that may not be completely true in all cases. All right? So the reason I'm telling you this is because I am going to make generalizations, and when I do, please don't be like, yes, but there is an exception to what he's saying. I'm well aware. Okay? That's why it's a generalization. There are exceptions. These are not sweeping generalizations. A sweeping generalization is when you say, I've seen this 3 times, therefore it must always be true. So if I were to say, right, I've seen 3 men who really love Corvettes, therefore all men love Corvettes. That's a sweeping generalization. Now, it may be a generalization to say all men love cars, right? That may be a generalization. It's still not completely true because there are men who, believe it or not, don't love cars. They're just like, yeah, whatever, give me my Honda Accord and I'll be happy. Okay, there are men like that. But for the most part, it's a generalization. Men seem to love cars for some reason. So we'll be using generalizations. Realize that I'm aware there are exceptions. I get it. But in order to keep things moving, we're going to do that. All right, there. That's all the introductory material. So here's generalization number 1. Men and women are not the same. It's a little surprising to me that this is controversial to anybody, but it's true. Go on YouTube and just scroll videos for a little while, and you very quickly see that men and women are very different. There's 2 videos that I've seen in the last couple of weeks that make me chuckle about the differences between men and women. One is a race. I don't know if you've seen this video. Somebody thought it would be a good idea to do a relay race with teams of men and women, and it was kind of cool. 2 men, 2 women on each team. And one of the countries, I believe it was Poland, which opens itself to a whole bunch of other jokes, decided they were going to have their 4th leg be run by a woman. And all the other countries said, we're going to have our 4th leg be run by a man. Now, exactly what you think would happen is what happened. In the first 3 legs, all the countries but Poland had 2 women run and 1 man run. Poland had 2 men run and 1 woman. So who do you think was ahead at the end of the 3rd leg? Poland, by a lot. And so they had this world-class sprinter who's running their 4th leg. And she's got a huge lead. And you watch the video, and the men just overtake her so fast. Why? Why did that happen? Because men and women are different, right? We excel at different things. Another one, and this one kind of touches my father heart. It's some cooking show. And there's this girl, and she's like in this really pressure-packed moment, and she can't get the jar opened. Like she got to open this jar. And she's doing this, and she's hitting it with a knife, and she's doing everything and starting to panic, and everybody's panicking. And all of a sudden she stops, and she looks at the crowd of people who are there to watch the competition, and she goes running over to it, and she hands the jar up to this guy, and he just takes it. It's her dad. And he's just like, pop, and hands it back to her. And it's like, oh, see, that's the moment, because girls love to rely on their dads, and dads can open the jar when they can't, which is very cool. So I could go on with examples of this, but the reality is men and women are not the same, and God created it that way. Now, we'll actually spend more time here next week. All right, we're going to spend more time talking about the difference between complementarian and egalitarian views of men and women. And if you don't know what those are, you'll find out next week. We'll talk about them a little bit. But it has to do with the differences between men and women. And we're going to talk about that a lot more next week. We'll look at Genesis 2, some of the stuff there, as we go through that. But for now, I think what I just want to leave this at is this. Oh, there you go again. See, this is going to happen several times. We can't get frustrated with it. Men's primary interaction with the world is physical. This is a generalization, all right? It's a generalization, but men's primary interaction with the world is physical. I'll give you a spoiler. Next week, we're going to have a statement very similar to this, but we won't have the word physical in it. We'll have a different word there because we're going to recognize that women's primary interaction with the world is not physical. It's different than that. Some of you might be able to guess at what that word might be, but you have to come back next week to find out. Now, what this means is because men's primary interaction with the world is physical, is it means that sometimes men do things that women don't understand. And I know, it's shocking. And sometimes men behave in ways that don't make sense to women. And sometimes, the way men process things just can be really frustrating. For example, men are more likely to do than to feel, right? And sometimes, if you're married, sometimes your wife just wants you to feel something. And what do you want to do? I just want to do something, right? And that also comes into play in this one, is men are more prone towards action than understanding, right? So we hear about something, and immediately the next one is like, what do? We dive into a solution. We want to act, we want to do, we want to solve. And sometimes our wives just want us to feel, understand, and be present, right? And by the way, guys, if you're newly married, figure this one out as soon as you can. It will save you a lot of grief. And guys, if you're not married yet, take this into your marriage, all right? Your wife wants you to be better at feeling, understanding, and being present, even though you're more inclined to do, to act, and to solve. And by the way, wives, when your husband does this, it's not because he's a jerk, it's because he's a man. And listen, God made him that way, right? Now, all of us have to find balance between the way God made us and how we use that. We'll talk more about this as we go through this evening's talk. But this is who men are. we primarily interact with the world physically. So with that in mind, my plan for tonight is to walk us through what I would say are the 10 words to describe a biblical man, all right? And we're going to look at a whole bunch of Bible passages to help us kind of fit this through. But what I want you to see here as we think about these 10 words, this one right here is number one, okay? Because we primarily interact in a physical way, one of the most important things for men is to be strong. Okay? Now, we have a good side of that and a bad side of that. And we'll kind of work through that as we go. Because, for example, strength without kindness can be abusive, right? And you go on down the list and think of strength without and then fill in the blank, it can be really bad. But strength used well can be really good. And if you think about who are the ideal men in the eyes of most people, it's strong. It's strong men. It's strength. And one of the great fears that most men carry with them is that they are not strong, is that they will be seen or thought of as weak. And so we'll start here. We'll start here in just a second. But the next two words I want you to think of as kind of like two big categories, all right? We're given strength by God so that we can do these two things, so that we can be protectors and so that we can be providers. We're going to see how this plays out in Genesis in just a second, in Adam and Eve's interactions with each other, and how when Adam got these things wrong, it was really bad for everyone, all right? Then as we go through the rest of the list, what we're going to see is we're starting internally and then moving externally. So we're starting with being disciplined and then being pure, and then we're moving more into relational things like being respectful and being a peacemaker. And then we get into some of the family unit ideas that go with being a father and being a husband, being controlled, compassionate, and then we'll finish with sacrificial, which is maybe the highest calling of men. And you can see how being strong and being sacrificial go together, right? And everything else kind of fits in between those. So that's where we're going to go tonight, and hopefully we'll get all the way through it. That's the plan. We're going to start in 1 Kings. All right, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 1 says, "When David's time to die draw near, he commanded his son Solomon, saying, I am about to go the way of all the earth." It's a great expression, isn't it? Because all of us die. And I think the closer you get to death, the more you understand it. This is for all of us. Everybody dies. And David says, it's my time. So here's the words he gives to his son Solomon, who he has already chosen to be the next king. Notice what the very first thing he says to him is, Solomon, be strong. Be strong. And show yourself a man. So in David's mind, David is a man after God's own heart. For Solomon to show himself a man, he needs to be strong. He goes on there. He says, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. Now, a couple things really quickly. Notice that for David, being strong has a spiritual sense, right? The most important part of being strong in David's mind is following God. Because I think what David understands is that maybe is the hardest thing to do. It's easy to not follow God. It's difficult to follow God. So in David's mind, strength, first and foremost, is given to us so that we can follow God. But secondly, do you notice, does this look familiar to you? Because a lot of times you'll be reading, especially in the Old Testament, and you'll read something, I feel like I've seen that before. Is that somewhere else? And it is actually, remember in Joshua, very similar thing that God said to Joshua. He said, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. This is similar to what David said. Follow the commandments of the Lord, but you shall meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you'll make your way prosperous. That's almost identical to what David said to Solomon. And then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? And here it is. What did God say to Joshua? Be strong. Be strong and courageous. Now, just kind of a cool thing here. I'm going to show you this because I think it's fun. Proverbs chapter 4. Remember who wrote Proverbs? Solomon, right? Solomon says to his sons, when I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother. Who is Solomon's father? Let's try that again. All right. He taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments, and live. So Solomon now is passing on to his sons what David passed on to him. Which one of the most important things for us as men to do is to make sure that we are passing generationally the good stuff. What's easy for us to do sometimes is pass generationally the bad stuff. Remember in Genesis, you've got the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? And then all of Jacob's sons. And Abraham has one big problem. He's a liar. And so he always starts to kind of bend the truth, kind of like a politician whenever he gets into trouble. Remember, he's down in Egypt, and he's afraid Pharaoh's going to kill him because his wife is beautiful, so he lies, says, oh, she's my sister. Everybody gets mad. Why would you lie about that? They throw him out of Egypt, right? So that's what he does. Shockingly, we see another generation later, Isaac, do the exact same thing. Isaac finds himself with a different king, a king of the Philistines, and he's worried because his wife is beautiful. He's like, they're going to kill me because they want you, so let's lie and say you're my sister. And so she does it. So it's no surprise then that Isaac's son Jacob ends up being the biggest liar of all. And if you read the story of Jacob, he is an unbelievable liar. He's a deceiver of all things. And then, sadly, he gets deceived by his sons. Remember when his sons sell Joseph into slavery, they come back and they say, we just found this coat. It's all full of blood. We don't know what happened. It's really sad. We think maybe Joseph's dead. Right? So the deceiver gets deceived. And what you see is this 4-generation long this problem going from man to man to man to man. And so what Solomon is doing here is saying to his son, I want to pass to you the good stuff that my father gave to me. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't work. Because if you read the story of Solomon and his sons, you see that Solomon's sons didn't listen to him. They didn't learn wisdom. And as a result, the kingdom of Israel splits from the kingdom of Judah, and there are really dark days there. However, the point here is, if we are going to be men who are strong, one of the things we have to do is learn to end the generational curses, right? And pass along the generational blessings. All right, you guys can chew on what it means to be strong, because the rest of the time we're going to talk about what it means to be strong. But the first thing is, what does it mean to be a protector? All right? Because part of being strong is to be a protector. So let's go to Genesis chapter 3. And Eve's in the garden with the serpent, and the serpent's trying to convince her to eat the fruit, right? So we know this story. They've had their interaction. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. So we all know this story, right? And here's where sin enters the world, wickedness enters the world, evil enters the world, everything gets broken. We go from being a Genesis 1 and 2 world to being a Genesis 3 world. And here is also where a lot of sermons end. Right? I don't know how often you've noticed, but most of our theology about Genesis 3 and the fall, it ends right here, right? No more. We don't go any further than that. But we really should, because the next line is really important. Because the next line says, and she also gave some to her husband. See, yeah, so it's Eve's fault, right? Because that was Adam's excuse, wasn't it? Adam's excuse when God said, Adam, what have you done? Notice that as you go further in Genesis 3. When God comes to talk to Adam and Eve, he doesn't ask Eve, what'd you do, Eve? He asks Adam, Adam, what have you done? And what does Adam answer with? Well, this is what she did, right? He doesn't even answer with what he had done. He answered with what she did. He says, well, it was that woman you gave me, God. She made me do it. Now, in this moment, is Adam being strong? This is an easy question. He's not, right? He's being extraordinarily weak. Strength means you own up to your mistakes. Strength means you take responsibility for yourself. Strength means you don't make excuses. Strength means you don't pass the blame along. Adam doesn't do any of that. He's like, it was the woman you gave me, God. Can you imagine he's blaming his wife and God in the same moment? The two people most capable of making him miserable the rest of his life. And that's who he chooses to blame. It says it was the woman you gave me. But here's what's the reality. It says, and she also gave some to her husband. This is so important. Who was with her? Chew on that for a second. This whole time that Eve is having this conversation with the devil, Adam's just standing there, silently, watching. Now, certainly he didn't know that the serpent was the devil, right? We would assume that. I mean, probably Adam and Eve had no clue what was going on. We go down the road of whether serpents could talk before that in the garden or not, or whether serpents could walk upright. There's all kinds of fun discussions. That's not for tonight. But whatever's going on there, as Adam is listening to Eve and the serpent talk, he's just standing there quietly. And if you remember the conversation, in the conversation, Eve actually misrepresents God, right? The serpent says, has God really said that, you can't eat from any of the trees in the garden? And Eve says, well, no, we can eat from most of them. We can't eat or touch that one. At this moment, I always wonder, why doesn't Adam step in? Right there. Wait, Eve, that's not what God said. Actually, God didn't say you can't touch it. He just said don't eat from it. That's really all he said. And then when the serpent begins to lie to Eve and to deceive her, where is Adam? He's just kind of passively standing over here doing nothing. He's not courageous. He's not strong. He's not protecting his wife. He's not protecting his wife from the evil one. And so, we want to move to the provider. Hold on, we'll stay there. So when we think about what it means to protect, and again, I don't want to spend a ton of time here because we got a lot of ground to cover. But if you're a husband, one of the most important things you do in life is to protect your wife. Okay? I want you to think about what that means. To protect your wife doesn't mean just to protect her from physical harm. It means you protect her from emotional harm. It means you protect her reputation. Can you protect your wife's reputation if you're always talking bad about her? So if you're, at work, talking about the old ball and chain, are you protecting her? Or are you kind of contributing to what other people think badly of her? If you're a son, you need to protect your mother. If you're a brother, you need to protect your sisters. If you're a man, you need to protect everyone around you. And I would in fact go down this list of saying this. As men, your responsibility is to be a protector. And so that means the people in your life, you ought to look to protect them. And because we want to be like Jesus, we ought to look to protect those who can't protect themselves, right? This is one of the reasons that we honor the people who do this, right? There are people in our society who protect those who can't protect themselves, and we give great honor to those. We say things like, thank you for your service, right? One of the reasons is inherently in us, we know that is a valuable thing. We know that is a thing that is worthy of honor, and so we ought to look for opportunities to protect those who can't protect themselves. And then finally, I would say this, if you are a man, the last person you protect is yourself. The last person you protect. When we're living in the sinful realm, so if you can imagine like a line, and at all times we're either above the line or below the line. And the reality is in our lives, in some ways we're above the line, in some ways we're below the line. But this idea of being a protector, when we're below the line as a protector, we look to protect ourselves first. Okay? And when we protect ourselves first, what we do is we make excuses like Adam. We pass the blame like Adam. We kind of rationalize things. We get defensive. We leave from engagement, right? It's so easy for men, right, to say, to do what? Just go quiet, right? I'm just going to go quiet because we're protecting ourselves. And when we're protecting ourselves, we're not protecting the people we ought to be protecting. So one of our roles, if we want to follow what the Bible says about being a man, is to be a protector. Had Adam protected Eve, we'd still be in a Genesis 1 and 2 world. All right, here's rule number 3, is to be a provider. So here we get to the place where God is going through what we call the curses. I don't love that word. I think it's more the explanation. And he's talked to the serpent and he's talked to Eve. And now he's talking to Adam and he's saying, look, because of sin, here's what's going to happen. Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I command you. By the way, that listen to the voice of your wife, what God is talking about is the way that Adam passively sat back and listened to that conversation instead of stepping into it and engaging in protecting. So because you did that and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain, you shall eat of it all the days of your life. You're like, okay, I'm still not seeing the provider part. Well, we keep going here. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field. Again, you heard me a couple weeks ago say, I think that's part of the curse, right? Is that you have to eat the plants of the field. We didn't have to eat vegetables before sin. That was because of Adam and Eve's sin that we have to do that. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. What's God saying to Adam here? Adam, it's no longer going to be easy for you to provide. Back in the garden, right, there were trees everywhere, fruit everywhere. God said you may freely eat of all the trees in the garden. For Adam and Eve in the garden, Adam providing was just saying, let's go pick the fruit off of that tree, right? And now it's, hey, now you're going to have to work the ground, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be hard, and you're going to sweat, and eventually you're going to die. Now, it's interesting, and we'll get more into this next week, because I want to do a little bit of a comparison next week, because there's some New Testament passages that play into this. But in these curses that we have here, these explanations, both Adam and Eve are given a task that will require them to go hand-to-hand combat with evil, right? Both of them have the opportunity to win that battle. So for Eve, it's her against the serpent, but it's through childbirth. Remember, God says to Eve, you're going to have pain in childbirth. We get to the New Testament, discover that it's through childbirth that Eve overcomes the curse, which is a really awesome thing, because it's the seed of Eve that crushes the head of the serpent. For Adam, his battle against the broken world, it's the Genesis 3 world, is he's fighting the ground, he's fighting nature, because his role is to provide. And so in a very real sense, what God is saying is, in this new world, Adam, where you're going to be providing, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. Skip ahead to the New Testament for a second here. This is 1 Timothy 5:8. Paul says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, there's that word, provide, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, a couple quick things on this. I don't think Paul is saying this is only for men. I think there's a sense in which this verse is for everybody, that we're all supposed to take care of the people in our household, which is our family, our extended family. But he is clearly talking to men here. And he is clearly making the point that providing for the people in our life is important. And if you are going to be a man, you have to provide. If you are a man and you are not providing, look, what does Paul say there? He has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That's how important he's saying this is. So it may or may not mean that you have to get married and provide for a family, although that's important. And it's not saying that you're all on your own to do it, because we'll talk about this more next week, that it is a partnership. Everything in marriage is a partnership, and we work together. And so we work together to protect, we work together to provide and all that. But hey, if you're a man, you ought not be depending on anybody else to take care of you. All right, so let's run through it. If you're a father, you ought to be the one taking care of your kids. If you're a husband, you ought to be the one taking care of your wife. If you're not married, you ought to be taking care of yourself. Okay? You ought not be dependent on somebody else to take care of you, because you should be providing for yourself. That's part of being a man. All right? So, strong. Being strong means being a provider and being a protector. Let's get into what's got to be going on inside of us in order to be that kind of a person. All right? Again, this is, where's my pen? This is Paul talking. It says, Titus 2, by the way, Titus 2 is a great passage for what we're talking about, because in Titus 2 and also in 1 Timothy 2, Paul addresses all different groups of people. So he's like, I'm talking to the men now, I'm talking to the women now, I'm talking to the older women now, I'm talking to the older men now. So he's doing all these things. And one of the things he says is, likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Self-control. To be disciplined. Discipline is the ability to do what I know I ought to do, even when I don't want to do it. Or even when it's not easy. Sometimes it's easy to do the easy thing. And that's a lack of discipline. Discipline means I'm able to do the hard thing because I know it's the right thing. So for me, I'm getting older. And one of the things I notice as I get older is everything creaks a little bit more. Right? I'm a little more sore and a little more stiff in the morning when I get up. Some of my joints start to hurt a lot more than they did 10 years ago. And also, I discover I'm beginning to grow in directions I haven't always grown, right? And it's harder and harder to not grow in those directions. So as I get older, I've discovered I have to be more disciplined. I have to be more disciplined with what I eat. I have to be more disciplined in making sure I get enough activity. I've got to get out and I've got to work out. Because if I'm not disciplined in those ways, then my body's going to go a really bad direction really fast. And so that means I have to start to schedule things out. If I don't be disciplined, try that again. If I am not disciplined, great harm will come to me physically. But this isn't just a physical issue, right? Discipline is something that is much, much greater than that. It's spiritually, relationally, all of these things. If I just go through life always doing the easy thing, then my life will never be what God created it to be. Now, in the Bible, we have a lot of really good examples of what happens when you're not disciplined. Like here's 1 Timothy, and here's where Paul is also talking about the whole physical thing. He's talking to Timothy, who's a young man. He says, have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for godliness, for while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. Okay, couple things. He starts out by saying, have nothing to do with irreverent and silly myths. What he's saying here is always learning. There is a temptation, I think, sometimes for us to spend all of our time learning stuff that we don't need to know. Okay? And the internet makes this even easier, right? You can get caught like going down a research hole where it's like, I got to learn everything I can about this topic. And then after 3 hours, you're like, I know so much about this topic and I will never use any of this knowledge ever again. And so Paul says, be careful. Be disciplined enough to not spend all of your time chasing unnecessary knowledge. Then he says, rather train yourself for godliness. He said, now this is great. Bodily training is of some value. Okay, I just talked about bodily training is of value. Especially as you get older, you've got to be disciplined to take care of yourself. But the key word here is this right here, right? Some. At the end of the day, if you spend all of your time working on getting in shape and being physically fit, and that is a temptation for some men, then you're not disciplined in the right way. I sometimes don't go to the gym anymore. I used to go to the gym. I work out at home most of the time now. It's just too embarrassing to go there, right? And realize how inferior I was to some of these other specimens of manhood. You've seen them, right? They're up. They get their big weights, and they're like right next to the mirror, and they're like. It's like I don't know if they're actually lifting to lift or just to look at themselves. I'm not sure which. They're super disciplined because they want to have big muscles and look awesome, right? Have that six-pack, all that. They're super disciplined, and that's good. Paul says that's of some value, but that's not the most important thing. He says, rather, godliness is what you train yourself for. So what does it look like for me to have the kind of discipline that builds godliness? Well, it means I start to build habits into my life because habits are what discipline's all about. So I have to build habits of prayer. I have to build habits of reading God's word. Build habits of being generous sometimes. Sometimes it's good to build in habits of giving things up, like fasting for a time. Those are all great habits to build because as I begin to build those habits, I strengthen myself spiritually. And so in those moments when I need to be disciplined, I'm able to do it. All right. This is where we kind of move from discipline into purity. This is Proverbs 5. We're going to take some time here. These are some of the Proverbs that are interesting and kind of fun to read, but also a little bit challenging for us. Here Solomon says he dies. He's talking about the fool, right? He's talking about a fool who is not disciplined. He dies for lack of discipline. And because of his great folly, he is led astray. Now, he's giving us a warning to say, if you're not disciplined, things are going to go badly for you. But he's specifically talking about one single area which moves us into our next piece of what it means to be a biblical man, and that's purity. He's saying you have got to be disciplined towards purity. And if we're going to be honest, for men, this is a struggle. This is a struggle. Why? Because we're physical beings. Right? Because we engage with the world in a physical way, it's easy for us to run down the road of physicality, right? And when relationships become physical, that seems to be a good thing for us. And it's so easy then, because this is how Satan tempts, right? Remember the line? To be up here means I'm disciplined for purity in physical matters. But when I'm not disciplined towards purity, I drop below the line, and now I chase after physical gratification, Whether it be the actual physical act or thinking about it or looking at it or whatever else it may be, I chase after that physical gratification because I don't have discipline. And so Proverbs spends a lot of time talking about being disciplined towards purity. Let's look at some of the things that Solomon says here. Proverbs 5, he says, drink water from your own cistern. It's a good time for me to get a drink here. Flowing water from your own well. Now, he is not here giving advice on like getting a water purifier or drinking bottled water instead of tap water. That's not his point here. He's saying, look, God has provided you with a wife. So he's talking to a married person. God has provided you with a wife. Get your refreshment there, right? That's where you should go. You've been given a well. That's where you drink your water. That's where you get the flowing water. Then he goes on, he says, why should you be intoxicated? By the way, interesting comparison here, right? You see this? You guys, did you notice that? It's kind of an interesting thought, that water has that kind of pure sense, and to be intoxicated is to misuse a good gift of God, but a gift that often gets misused. And so even in that little comparison, we're seeing going from pure and healthy to not so pure, not so disciplined, and not so healthy. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? He said, look, if you're going to be disciplined, if you're going to be a disciplined man, one of the most important places for you to be disciplined is in this area of purity. Let's go on and see what else Solomon has to say about this. He says, the reproofs of discipline are the way of life, to preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Now, I'm going to make a generalization here, okay? So please hear that. Not all women are the evil woman. Not all women are the smooth-tongued adulteress. But they are out there, okay? I think we all understand this. There are women out there, I don't think any of them are here tonight. There are women out there who are just looking for a man. And they will do anything, and they will say anything, and they will give anything to get a man. And a man who is not disciplined is going to fall for it. And so Solomon says you've got to discipline yourself for purity. Discipline yourself for purity so that when you're approached by this woman who's chasing any man she can get, you're not going to fall for it. Because to fall for it can be very, very dangerous. We'll keep going with what Solomon says here in Proverbs. This is Proverbs 7:6. It says, for at the window of my house I've looked out through my lattice, and I've seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths, a young man lacking sense. Let's do this. Can we read Proverbs 7? This is good stuff, all right? You guys I'm going to do something tonight that you have never, ever seen me do, okay? And some of you, it's going to make you think I'm getting really old. What you don't know is when I have my notes up here, they're like in 14 or 15 font. So I don't have to do this stuff. All right, here we go. So here we go. He says, he's looked out of the window and he sees this young man. And this. I'll keep going. He writes, this young man passing along the street near her corner. So we're back to this woman, the smooth-tongued adulteress, right? Taking the road to her house. In the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. Now, let's talk about what he's done so far. He's walking at a place where he knows he's going to find this woman, at a time of day when he knows she's going to be out, and most other people won't notice. So this is, when we talk about disciplining yourself for purity, this is what we're talking about. Disciplining yourself for purity means don't put yourself in a place at a time with a person that's going to bring you down. Be disciplined enough to say, if I go there, I might see that. If I go there at that time, then this might be happening. And by the way, you can extend this beyond just purity, right? This goes across the board. Discipline means saying, if I go there, this might happen, so I'm not going to go there. If I go with these people, this might happen, so I'm not going to go with these people. Let's keep going. And behold, the woman meets him, right? So there it is. Dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart, she is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. All right, so he's just saying lots of things like she's out to get a man, right? And you can, we'll go a little bit further. Verse 13, she seizes him and kisses him, and with bold face she says to him, I had to offer sacrifices, and today I have paid my vows, so now I have come out to meet you, which is essentially to say, we can go mess around and I'm not going to get pregnant. That's what she's saying right there, okay? What she does, you got to see this because this is so important. She seizes him and kisses him. So what is she appealing to here? Physicality, right? Because that's where she knows she can get him. So she's going to appeal to his physicality. So again, being disciplined to be pure means beware of the touchy-feely woman. She may not be dressed like this, she may not be in a place like this, but beware of those who appeal to your physicality because that can lead you down a bad road. We'll skip to the end here. She goes on, she says lots of other stuff trying to get him to come. But we get to the end, and I want you to hear how it ends. All at once he follows her. As an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast. So this is a hunting picture where there's like a trap where a deer is running and then it gets its foot caught in the trap. So now it's stuck in the trap and it can't do anything. It can't go anywhere. And what's the hunter going to do? Well, that's the rest of the verse. As a stag is caught fast till an arrow pierces its liver. As a bird rushes into a snare. So you got 3 pictures there of animals getting caught in a trap and getting killed. He does not know that it will cost him his life. To not be disciplined for purity will absolutely destroy your life. So men, and this goes for all of us, discipline yourself towards purity. Because this, I don't want to say more than any other area because I don't want to be overly general, but almost this more than any other area has the potential to absolutely destroy your life. So many lives and relationships and marriages and families have been destroyed because men weren't disciplined for purity. So discipline yourself for purity. All right, let's keep going. Our next word is to be respectful. Okay, so now we're shifting a little bit. We're moving away from the inward to the outward of what should men be like. Do not rebuke an older man. This is 1 Timothy 5. And again, remember, Timothy's a young man. And here again, Paul is giving general instructions to all different groups of people. He says, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, all in purity. There's that word again, right? So that's an important word. So what Paul is saying here is, look, in all of your interactions as a man, you should be respectful. And I think this probably is more for the younger men, because I know for me, when I was younger, this was probably an area where I didn't do very well. Especially when you're at that certain age where you think you know everything, right? And everybody else knows nothing, especially your parents know nothing. And anytime you feel like you have that superiority, whether it's intellectual or moral or physical or whatever else it may be, it can be hard to respect other people. And what Paul is simply saying is being a man means being respectful. And so if you're interacting with an older man, I'm going to be the get off my lawn guy for just a second. Okay? So this is where I go curmudgeonly, so if I offend you, forgive me. Our society has always been a place where younger men think they have all the answers and older men don't. And I think it's getting worse. Now that might just be me getting older. Right? I mean, the 50-year-olds 20 years ago might have been saying this about me, the 30-year-old. He's the worst one ever. But I do think we're getting to a place, and I'm not going to go down the road, but like the internet has a big part in this. Our access to knowledge and information has a huge part in this, that there's this sense of I can learn so much so fast that all of a sudden I know more than other people. And the reality is the people who are older than you actually have a lot of good stuff that you can learn from them. This is still true for me, right? I think it's wonderful that at our church I am now older than the average person. I think that's fantastic. But there's still a lot of people older than me that I can learn from. And if you're 35 or 40, you can learn so much from people who are older than you. Just because they don't know how to get their phone to work right doesn't mean they don't have a wealth of knowledge. And I know we kind of chuckle at that a little bit, but I actually think it's a problem. And so I just an encouragement there. Younger men, be respectful to the older men. And be respectful to the younger men. Treat them as brothers. And I love this next part. Treat the older women as mothers and the younger women as sisters. Let's just chew on that just for a second. All right? Because the younger women, if you're a younger man, the younger women are the ones you want to date. Right? The ones you want to say, hey, maybe this is the one that I'll spend my life with. Treat them like your sister until you put a ring on their finger. If you want to be disciplined towards purity, that's the standard. Treat them like a sister till you put a ring on the finger. Okay? Somebody turn that into a song. Like, I think Beyonce did that already, didn't she? Men should be peacemakers. All right? Peacemakers. This is an important one because we're physical and because being strong is so important to us, it's often easy for us to try to overpower each other. Not necessarily physically anymore, right? But maybe verbally, maybe emotionally, and maybe psychologically, we try to overpower each other. And so, there's always that clash of I want to be the bigger man, I want to be the stronger man, I want to be the better man. Paul says in 1 Timothy 2:8, I desire then that in every place the men should pray. We could actually spend a lot of time just on that phrase, right? Because throughout history, it's not just now, but throughout history, even in Jesus' time, the women were always more prone towards prayer than the men. But when the men pray, good things happen. So just chew on that. I desire that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. This is John's favorite verse, because what he wants me to say is that on Sundays when we sing, everybody ought to lift their hands, right? I'm not going to say that. But if you want to lift your hands, great. You should lift your hands. It's a great way to kind of say, hey, I'm surrendering myself to God in this moment, and I want to just kind of open my hands to let him have as he will. And some of you, that works for you. Some of it doesn't. That's not what this verse is actually saying. Here's what it's saying. The key word here is holy hands. Because men are what? Physical. So what we do matters. And what Paul is saying is, as you go through your life as a doer, you love action, are the things that you're doing with your hands, right? Hands are always a symbol of what you're doing. Are the things that you're doing with your hands holy? So that when you come together to worship or to pray, the hands that you lift to God, the hands with which you offer your worship to God, are they holy hands or are they corrupted hands? Are they impure hands, right? That's what he's getting at. But notice what he says then. So lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. He wants us to be characterized as peacemakers. And I'll tell you what, when men prioritize peace, unity follows. Now, I get it. Women can be at war too, right? The whole book of Philippians is a letter written to get two women to stop fighting. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. But when men step up to the plate and say, I want to be characterized as a peacemaker, I want to take on peacemaking as one of my core elements, unity will follow. Why? Because men are doers, men love action, men love solutions, men are strong, men protect, men provide. And do you see how all of those point towards peace? When we are strong in our protection, when we are strong in our provision, when we seek solutions that are peace-oriented, then we bring unity and we bring peace. And so Paul says, look, if you're a man, peace is important. And nowhere is this more important than in the home. In the home, the husband and the father ought to be the great peacemaker. But he cannot be that if he's not controlled. This is a little bit like being disciplined. Discipline is the work we put in to be controlled, right? It's the habits I form, it's the places I go, it's the decisions I make, it's the work that I put in so that I can be controlled. Look at this verse in Colossians 3. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Here's homework for husbands, okay? And only do this if you think you can. If you're not courageous enough yet, give it a week. Tonight, ask your wife, when have I been harsh with you? And wives, you have to be courageous and tell the truth. Because then he can figure out when not to do that. But it can be devastating to a relationship when a husband is not controlled, when a husband is harsh, when he lashes out. Because sometimes, sometimes guys, we carry something with us, right? And it may have nothing to do with anything that's happening in the house. It may not be anything with the kids. It may not be anything to do with the wife. It's just something we're carrying with us, maybe from work, maybe from some other interaction somewhere else. Maybe we're just angry about politics, whatever it may be. And then one little thing sets us off, and who feels it? Our wife. Because we're harsh with them instead of addressing it where it probably should have been addressed in the first place. And so what Paul is saying is you need to be controlled. So when you have that moment where you feel like you're about to go off and you feel like you're about to be harsh, you got to control yourself. And then he applies the exact same principle to fathers. He says, fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. There was a Bible teacher in a Christian school. This was, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. There was this one kid in the class who was just really angry all the time. I mean, he just scowled all the time. You just feel the anger coming off him. And he wasn't a bad kid. You could just tell he was angry all the time. And I noticed one day as he was leaving class, because it was Bible class, he's carrying his Bible, he had this verse, Colossians 3:21, like written right across here, like in big black letters, Colossians 3:21. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that's a message to his dad. I wonder if he's hoping his dad will see that. Because he's not a father, so he's not writing about him. He's trying to communicate to his dad, Dad, stop provoking me. Stop provoking me. Let's take a minute and talk about that word provoking. Let's do it with some fun, okay? So I'm gonna take you to some resources real quick. This is BibleHub.com, all right? So this is one of my go-to websites. I have actually a different Bible software that I personally use. I'm going to introduce that to you next week. But this is free and it's online, so it's simple. BibleHub.com. One of the things you can do when you want to dig more deeply into a word is to say, what do other versions of the Bible say? So I always teach from the ESV. Every so often I'll use a different translation. I'm almost always in the ESV, but sometimes I can go look at other translations and you see some other words. So look at this here, Colossians 3:21. By the way, what you do, go to BibleHub.com, and up here in this little box right here, you type in Colossians 3:21, and it will give you this whole parallel thing, which gives you all the different translations. If it doesn't give you the parallel, you can click right there where it says parallel, right? So look at this. It says, fathers, do not embitter your children, right? Fathers, do not aggravate your children. So now we're getting an idea of, okay, so some of the translators of the Bible, when they translated it, they said, okay, that's interesting. These are some other words that you could use. Now, another thing you can look at is not just other translations, but other verses, like parallel passages. Where are some other verses in the Bible that talk about this? So if you scroll down, and I can't scroll because this is a slide, but if you scroll down on the page, it'll look like this. And notice over here on the right, you start to have some study tools. This one right here, cross-references. That means these are other verses in the Bible that talk about the same idea. And here you have two listed. You have Ephesians 6:4, and you have Colossians 3:22. Ephesians 6:4, though, says, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. It's actually quite similar, and we'll look at that verse in just a minute. So when you want to dig more deeply into a word, look at other translations, look at other passages. Let's go back here to the top part here. The next thing you can do is if you really want to get crazy, this is where remember we talked at the beginning about exegetical, where you're really mining down deeply into the words. Every so often on a Sunday, you'll hear me talk about the Greek, right? Or the Hebrew. The reason being the New Testament was originally written in Greek, so if we want to get a better understanding of exactly what Paul was thinking, we look at the language in which he wrote it and see the word. You can do that for free. You don't have to go to seminary to be able to do that, okay? When I was in college, they said, well, you got to learn Greek, you got to learn Hebrew, because otherwise you can't know. By the time I was in seminary, the computers were out, and it was like, hey, check out these new resources. Now anybody can do this, which is pretty awesome. So if you go up here, click on this link here that says interlinear, right? Or you can obviously click on the Greek, or you can click on Strong's. Any of those will get you to what the Greek says, but if you click on interlinear, it'll take you to a page that looks like this. I don't know if you can see that, but basically what it does is it gives you this line right here. This is the actual Greek, all right? exactly as it appears in the ancient manuscripts. Up above it is kind of the English words that, how do you pronounce it? And then below it is the words that it was translated into. That's how an interlinear Bible works. By the way, you can get a hard copy of an interlinear Bible. Just go to a bookstore or go on Amazon and type in interlinear, and you can actually get one that looks like this in the Bible. But we're looking at the word provoke. So we go over here. Here it is, right here. It's provoke, right? Just like it said it was. But what's interesting is what you can do. Whoops, I'm going to go back to that one here. Let's go back to that one. I can now click down if I want to go deeper into this Greek word. If I click right here on the number, okay, you guys see that? If I click right there on the number, it'll take me to a page that looks like this. And now I have all of this information about what this word is about. And some of you are like, why are you teaching us this? And there's like 3 of you who are really excited about this. Okay, so this is for you guys right now. So I've got here, this is the Strong's Concordance, which is just, you don't need to know anything about that other than that's the source that this is all from. And it gives you, this is terrible. I'm going to do this. It gives you the original word, the part of the speech, the transliteration, yada, yada, yada. Down here is where the origin of the word is. Here it's give you other ways that this is translated into English. But what I really want you to see is this over here. Because this word, eratizo, only appears twice, 2 other times in the New Testament. One is in 2 Corinthians, and one is in Colossians, right here that we're looking at. Do you know what's not here? Some of you are like, where are you going with this? Ephesians. Now, most of you don't care about it. This makes me so curious. Because I was reading in Colossians 3, and I looked at parallel passages, and remember Ephesians 6:4 says what? Fathers, do not provoke. But it's not here, so what does that mean? That means that Paul used a different Greek word there. And some of you are like, so what? The point is, dads, don't make your kids mad. Yes, it is that. We're going to get somewhere in this, I promise, okay? What you're doing right now is this is the curtain coming back at what it looks like for me during the week, right? I get super excited about some of this stuff. And I do it in private so I don't embarrass myself. But, okay, so now I skipped all the steps. I just went to Ephesians 6 in the interlinear, okay? And so now I'm looking at it. Where's that provoke word? Here it is. This is provoke. But look, it's a different Greek word here. And just to let you know, the Greek word is different in this sense. In Colossians, the Greek word means to stir up, okay? And in Ephesians, it just means to make mad. And it's like, what's the difference? The difference is Ephesians it's like this momentary, in an instant, this one action. In Colossians, it's this, I just keep stirring and keep stirring and keep stirring. And dads, sometimes we do both of those, don't we? Sometimes we maybe do something in a moment, in the heat of the moment, we get angry and we blow up at our kids. And sometimes it's something that we do that we just keep doing it, and beneath the surface, we are provoking them to anger, and we are discouraging them. All right, so all that to get us back to here. Ephesians 6, right? Do not provoke your children. Let me really quick talk to you about how we do this, okay? One of the ways that we do this as dads is we set unnecessary limits on our kids. We're overly strict. It's great to have rules. I'm a big rules person. I love rules. I was strict with my kids. But as our kids grow, we have to learn how to release some of those limits and let them begin to be part of the process. Let them begin to be part of the decision-making process. Like, it's great. If you have a 14-year-old and you say, I want you home by 10, that's awesome. If you have a 17-year-old and you say, I want you home by 9, that might not be awesome. You might want to say to your 17-year-old, hey, let's talk about what time you think you should be home. Because when you continue to have unnecessary limits that you put on them, that's the stirring and the provoking. Another way that we do this is with inappropriate expectations. So you guys know I love sports. I do all kinds of different sports. I've reffed, I've coached, I've played, all that. One of the things that just frustrates me, maybe even makes me angry, is dads who are living their glory years through their kids, right? And maybe not even living their glory years, but just trying to get some glory years. Or maybe just, thinking, I just want my kid to win. I want my kid to be the best. and they yell at their kids, and they've got these high expectations. My kid's got to be, you know what? Dads, it's okay if your kid loses. And in fact, it's probably better for them because they're going to learn something important. And get this, it's okay if your kid's not the best on the team. Only one person can be the best on the team. And if there's 11 players, the odds are pretty good it's not your kid. And that's okay because they're going to learn how to work as a team. And listen, it's okay if your kid hates the sport or whatever else you've got them trying. Have your kids try lots of stuff, but if they hate it, if it's killing them, don't keep making them do it. Make them finish the season, talk it over, figure it out. Don't stir with unrealistic expectations. All right, I don't want to go any further. I could talk about this for a long time. Let's move on. Time's moving. Go back to Colossians 3, and here we move into the next phase, which is being compassionate, right? So be controlled, don't be harsh. Husbands, again, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. We need to be compassionate. And I'm coming back to this verse just to point out that this is one of those phrases, the husbands love your wife phrase. It's something that pops up over and over and over in the New Testament. And this may be hard to hear, guys. Wives are never told to love their husbands. Never. Now, at one point, the older women are told to teach the younger women how to love them, but they're not commanded to do it, which is kind of this interesting thing. So husbands, you don't get to say, well, you're not being loving to me, so I'm not being loving to you. That's actually not the option, and you're going to see why that's not the option here in just a second. Let's go here to 1 Peter 3. Similar passage. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. Hold that word. That's a key word. Showing honor to the women. Some of you aren't going to like this. As the weaker vessel. So, generalizations here, right? Okay. Weaker isn't necessarily worse. But let's be honest. If we're talking physically, women are weaker than men, generally speaking. And there are some other ways that women are weaker than men. That's actually not what Peter's getting at here. He's getting at it in the sense of like the fine china, right? Like if you drop a plastic plate, it bounces. That's the man. If you drop the fine china, it shatters. That's the woman. He's not saying that they're weaker or worse. He's saying weaker as in more valuable, more important, right? The most important thing in your life. Since there heirs with you the grace of life. Go back to the word understanding. Because by the way, see this at the end here too? So again, we're seeing this idea of men praying. That's important. Men, if you're not right with your wife, your prayers don't get through. That's kind of interesting. Live with your wife in an understanding way. This is where the Bible is challenging us as men to get out of our normal. Because what are we? We're physical, right? We prefer to do rather than what? To understand. Yeah, I set you up at the beginning with that one. This does not come naturally for men. And what Peter is saying, if you want to love your wife, if you want to be compassionate with your wife, you've got to learn to study her. Figure out how she works. Figure out what makes her tick. Figure out what brings her joy. Figure out what brings her life. And then invest your life in doing and saying and being those things. Learn to understand your wife. That's what it means to be a compassionate husband. One more place this comes up. For to this you have been called. Because Christ, I gotta go back. I gotta show you this. I can't believe I missed this. This is one of my favorite things. See this word right here? Likewise? That's kind of like therefore. Right? When you see likewise, you got to go back. So we go back. He says this. This is what Peter says. For to this you have been called because Christ also suffered. Husbands, dads, men, one of your callings is to suffer. That's encouraging, isn't it? Yes, I was hoping David would say that tonight. Look at, he suffered for you doing what? Leaving an example so you might follow in his steps. So Christ suffered, and then he says, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. it sounds like he might actually be saying here that living with your wife might be suffering. It sounds that way a little bit. I mean, I don't want to like throw that out there, but there are times when marriage is not easy, and there are times when you're kind of doing this, and what he's saying is in those hard times. All right, just think about Jesus. All right, when he says Jesus suffered, what's he talking about? What did Jesus do that was suffering? It's not a trick question. He died, right? He died. Did he deserve to die? He was crucified by who? The people he loved. The people that he wanted to save. He was falsely accused by them. He was crucified by them so that he could save them. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. Another place we see this same principle is Ephesians. Husbands, love your wives how? As Christ loved the church and did what? Gave himself up. So what I'm getting at here, guys, is we're called to die. We are called to give ourselves up and die for the people we love. There was a time in my life, some of you know this, where I had to make a really tough decision about me and my family. So I'd been living in Michigan for a long time. We'd been in the same church for 15 years, and I left that church. That's a different story. And then this church called, and I didn't really want to come, but they kept calling. I kept saying no. They were persistent. Spoiler alert, I came. But in a lot of ways, God was working in me and doing things in me, and that's a whole different story. But we hit this moment in our family where, what do I do with my kids? What do I do with my wife? Because I'm now asking them to uproot their lives. They've lived in the same place for 15 years. We've just come through an extraordinarily traumatic year and a half where really bad things happened at our church. And it hadn't impacted my family until that year and a half. And that year and a half was really, really hard on my kids. So bad that we had to take them out of one school, put them in a new school, and they had just started to flourish again. And they're just starting to flourish. And now God is saying, David, I want you to go to this other church 6 hours away. What do I do? Common sense is what? Pick up the family and go, right? Family follows the man. And I prayed and I sought counsel. And I read this verse. And I realized that my calling as a father and as a husband, my calling was to be the one that sacrificed. My calling was to be the one that suffered. My calling was to be the one that died for the good of my family. And so for 6 years, I drove back and forth 2, 4, sometimes 6 times a week to make sure I could be the father I needed to be and the husband that I needed to be and the pastor that I needed to be. Now listen, this church was incredibly gracious to allow that to happen and incredibly generous in making it happen, and I am forever grateful for that. But at the end of the day, that decision came from this verse. Because at the end of the day, I had to say, you know what? This is my final authority in life. And I'm the one that's called to sacrifice. So that kind of brings us to our last word, doesn't it? Is that a real man, a biblical man, is sacrificial. Willing to give up his life. First for his wife. Secondly for his family. How about just for the people around him? This is what Jesus said. Yeah, I told you we'd get to the Gospels. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Now listen, we hear Jesus say this, and it resonates with us because this is something that we just know inside of us, and everybody knows this inside of us. A few years ago, our family was here. So you may not know exactly where this is. This is in Normandy, France, right? This is where we landed at D-Day, just off of Omaha Beach. Thousands of young American men gave their lives for a continent they didn't even live on, for people they didn't even know. Many of them probably for reasons they didn't even know. But we look at these young men as like the heroes, right? These are the greatest men. We call them the greatest generation. Why? Because they were willing to sacrifice. Because they were willing to give up everything for us. And so this is something, just humanly speaking, we know this. Think about this. When you think about war stories, who is the hero? Is the hero the man who throws himself on the grenade for his brothers? Or is the hero the one who hides when the battle comes? We all know who the hero is. Some of you guys remember the Saving Private Ryan, right? You guys remember this scene? This is like one of the worst scenes ever to watch in a movie. This guy's Corporal Upham is his name. And he's looking up the stairs because what's going on up the stairs and in the room at the top of the stairs is one of the men in his unit is fighting for his life against a German and is losing. And he knows that. And instead of running in to make it 2-on-1 and potentially save his comrade, he goes and he hides. And his fellow soldier is killed. And at this moment in the movie, you can kind of see the outline of the German soldier now coming down the stairs. And he comes down, and it's such a poignant moment because he gets to the guy, and he looks down at him, and he doesn't even bother with him. He just walks right on by. Because in his mind, that's not a man. I don't even need to worry about that guy. He's not a man, he's a coward. You see, courage and sacrifice go hand in hand. Let me give you one final kind of encouragement on this issue of sacrifice from Jesus. This is what Peter says about Jesus. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but he continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. All right, men, there are going to be times in your life when you try to love the people around you, try to love your wife, and she might say bad things to you. She might say bad things about you. She might not treat you the way you want to be treated. Jesus was reviled. He did not revile in return. He suffered. He did not threaten. When you love your wife with no expectations, when you give your life sacrificially for your wife with no expectations, one of two things is going to happen. Number one, she might respond. And your marriage might get a whole lot better. And that would be pretty cool. That would be awesome. And the other thing that might happen is she might not respond. And she might keep treating you badly. And that's even better for you. What? Because if that's what happens, you'll begin to know Jesus in a way you haven't known him. And you'll begin to understand exactly what it is that he did for you. Because no matter how badly the people in your life treat you, you've treated him worse. And he still died for you. And he still loved you. And there can be no greater blessing in this life than to carry Christ's cup of suffering with him. Now, I don't wish that for anybody. I don't hope that for anybody. And I'm pretty sure in this room, that's probably not the outcome if you sacrificially give yourself for your wife. But it's a possibility. And the reality is if you love and you sacrifice, and that love and sacrifice is not returned, then you get to know Jesus in a way that very few people get to. And that is an amazing blessing. That's why Peter ends by saying Jesus did what? He continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. And as a man, that's what you can do. You can entrust yourself to him who judges justly. That's God, the righteous judge. All right. We are through our 10 words. And I've got a few more slides, but I don't have to get to them because they're kind of like next steps. So let me open this and see if we don't have a lot of questions.